Next lesson in imperialism takes us to India. The big idea for this lesson: through economic and military power, Great Britain colonized and dominated India. The essential question: how did Britain gradually extend its control over most of India despite opposition? The aim of the lesson: identify the British East India Company and the Sepoy Rebellion, and explain the causes and effects of British colonial rule in India. Let's set the stage. The British East India Company established trading rights in India in the early 1600s. It had its own private army of Indian soldiers called sepoys. Known for widespread corruption, oppressive policies, and monopolies of business, it caused poverty among India's weavers. By the mid-1800s, and with the decline of the Mughal Empire, the British East India Company controlled most of India. Britain took control of India, which were French colonies, in 1763. By the middle of the 1800s, Britain had secured control over much of India. The British pursued a policy of divide and rule in India, pitting various groups against one another for their benefit. India is home to people with many different traditions and languages. As a result, India was not able to unite against the newcomers. The British took advantage of Indian divisions by encouraging competition and disunity among rival princes. Where diplomacy or intrigue did not work, the British used their superior weapons to overpower local rulers. How did the British exploit Indian diversity? They played different princes and peoples against each other. This was called divide and rule. Now let's look at the British East India Company. The British East India Company, or the Company as it was called, was a private enterprise seeking gradual conquest of India. It drafted sepoys, native troops, to help the company meet its goals. The goals of the company was really to control India because India was such a profitable colony. And the British East India Company started to run into some trouble when they first required the sepoys to serve anywhere in India or overseas, which was against their religion. And the company also passed a law that allowed Hindu widows to remarry, which was against Indian culture. The company faced even more trouble when in 1857, Muslim and Hindu sepoys of the Bengal army mutinied against the company because of rumors that natives were converting to Christianity and using animal fat on rifle cartridges. To load the rifle, the sepoys had to bite off the ends of lubricated cartridges, as indicated on the picture on the slide. A rumor spread among the sepoys that the grease used to lubricate the cartridges was a mixture of pigs and cow's fat, and having oral contact with it was an insult to both the religion of Muslims and Hindus. Troops that refused to use the animal fat were imprisoned. As a result of some of the practices of the company, the sepoy mutiny occurred. So in response to the lubricated cartridges, sepoy soldiers attacked British troops. Massacres of women and children were also not uncommon. In retaliation, many sepoys were arrested and executed. Hundreds of sepoys were also fired from cannons in a frenzy of British vengeance. You will see this picture in the next slide. The Sepoy Rebellion left a bitter legacy of fear, hatred, and mistrust on both sides. By 1859, the British East India Company was ended. Rule was transferred to the British Crown, and Queen Victoria was declared Empress of India. Here's the slide I was referring to, where sepoys were actually strapped to the front of cannons and executed as a punishment for the Sepoy Mutiny. So how could the Sepoy Rebellion be interpreted as resulting from British feelings of superiority? The rebellion began because the British did not take into consideration the religious practices of the sepoys, and the British did not regard Indian religions as equal in importance to their own religion. As a result of the mistreatment of native Indians by the British, reforms were put in place in India. First, the British abolished traditional Indian practices such as sati, or female infanticide, or killing of female babies. This actually could still be going on in some remote places in India today. And they abolished slavery. Second, the British promoted the development of trade and banking systems. Third, the British pushed manufacturing industry and trade in traditional spices, teas, dyes, and textiles. So what was the impact of British colonial rule? After 1858, Parliament set up a system of colonial rule in India called the British Raj. A British viceroy in India governed in the name of the Queen, and British officials held the top positions in the civil service and army.
There were many effects of British colonial rule. Some of the good or positive effects: new railroads and roads that linked many parts of India. Telegraph and postal systems helps to unite people. Irrigation systems improved farming. New laws. Schools were opened. Customs that threatened human rights were ended. And they adopted a parliamentary system of government. Some of the bad or negative effects: Indian resources go to Great Britain. British made goods to replace local goods made in India. Farms grow cash crops rather than food crops, which can result in a famine. Top jobs go to the British. Indians were treated as inferior, and Great Britain tried to replace Indian culture with Western ways.
There was a growth of Indian nationalism as a result of everything that Britain was doing in India. Number one, the Indian National Congress was formed in 1885. It comprised of educated Indians, predominantly Hindu, who demanded increasing equality and self-rule. Second, a Muslim League was founded in 1905. It was comprised of Muslim Indians who sought a partition of India based on religion and language. So India is made up of Hindus and Muslims. And Muslims wanted a partition of India so they could have a Muslim state. This is something we're going to look into later on in the year. So which of the following is true about the Sepoy Rebellion in 1857? A. It was caused by violations of Hindu and Muslim soldiers' dietary laws. B. It resulted in a withdrawal of Britain from the Indian subcontinent. C. It was caused by a lack of representation for Indian in the British Parliament. D. It unified the British and French against the native population. The answer is A. It was caused by violations of Hindu and Muslim soldiers' dietary laws. Next question. To protect their trading empire in India, the British East India Company used A. British troops trained in India. B. British troops trained in Britain. C. European mercenaries. D. Indian troops led by British officers. The answer is D. Indian troops, otherwise known as sepoys, led by British officers. What was the founding idea of the Indian National Congress when it was formed in 1885? A. Modernize the Indian military. B. Expand the role of Indians in the colonial government. C. Extend Indians' influence in Southeast Asia. D. Link India more closely with Britain. The answer is B. Expand the role of Indians in the colonial government.
Let's answer our essential question. How did Britain gradually extend its control over most of India despite opposition? The British East India Company established trading rights in India in the early 1600s. It had its own private army of Indian soldiers called sepoys. The British took advantage of Indian divisions by encouraging competition and disunity. This was called divide and rule. The British used their superior weapons to overpower local rulers, and Great Britain tried to replace Indian culture with Western ways. This is the end of the lesson. Please complete the assignment that goes along with this lesson.